And we are back, and I'm joined now by Ben Joy. He's here to talk all about
Yo.
late bloomers. What's up, Ben?
Yeah, I'm good. I am good. I'm very excited about going to Osaka to
Yeah,
Super Nintendo World. I'm excited about that, as long as they haven't got the samurai ride there. That is at Thorpe Park,
yeah.
because
We
I'm
should
not going on that
mention Ben's
again.
got bad experience with theme park rides this week. He went on a ride at Thorpe Park here in the UK and felt very ill afterwards. So he'll be
Yeah,
on Princess Peach's teacups, not on the
I will.
not on Rainbow Road, the roller
Yeah,
coaster.
I'm getting old. I'm getting old. I used to not faze me. The roller coasters was fine. It was just that one that wiped me out for like, I think it was like for 2 hours, which I was not proud of. But anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about.
No, although I could talk about that at length. Instead, let's talk about games that are late bloomers is the term we're using for this, isn't it? So it's games that have
Yeah.
come out. Maybe they're early access, maybe they're not, and they kind of fly under the radar a little bit. We know it's very difficult to be successful in the world of gaming. It's unless you're one of the big players, it's difficult to get attention, difficult to be discovered. But certain games, for whatever reason, after a period of low activity, really start to spike and take off. And I guess that's what you're here to talk about, like examples of games that
It
have done
is.
that.
Yes, it is. Yeah, so we've talked a few times over the past few weeks about, and Dan referenced it earlier as well, about long life games, and that's we've really focused on games that have kind of been a hit and they've extended their life, and people are still playing them years after they came out. But they were games that were always kind of successful from the off. And this week, yeah, I just wanted to talk about games that maybe aren't quite as successful from the off, but then have, as you said, have seen a surge maybe a year down the line, 2 years down the line, and all of a sudden they're the hottest thing and everyone's talking about them and playing them, and kind of what goes into that and what makes that happen. I would preface this entire conversation by saying, this doesn't happen all the time. It's not something to build your business plan around. Like, if there's a lot of factors that are not necessarily in your control that play into this, but there are definitely things that you can do and keep an eye out for, that you can help get on top of these factors when they happen. So I actually started thinking about this because I read in Simon Carles's Games Discoverability newsletter. He referenced about a game called Wonder Song, which I hadn't actually heard about before, and I'll touch on this in a little bit, but there was a really good kind of a post-mortem from the developer about that. It was one of these games that had a surge late on in its life. But I also started thinking about that, got me thinking about Among Us, because that's the hot thing right now, isn't it? Everyone's playing Among Us. I mean, we've played a little bit of Among Us. I didn't really get my head around it yet, but we've played it together.
Yep.
Uh,
I
so
remember murdering you in the O2 area of one of the maps. And yeah, I mean,
yeah,
Among Us is a great example of a game that, that was really under the radar for a long time, and then that had what you would call a streamer influence spike. Like, that was really driven by a few streamers, and then obviously a few streamers turned into even more streamers. That's very
mm.
much that's a Twitch success story, Among Us, more than any game I can think of in recent memory.
Yeah. So what's interesting about that is, you're absolutely right. It did stem from Steam, and again, I was reading a really interesting article that referenced one of the developers from Among Us had kind of not done quite the post-mortem that Wandersong have done, but kind of talking about the process they went through. And what really picked it up is that they reached out to itch.io and asked to have a takeover of their homepage, which they got.
Mhm.
And then it just so happened that a streamer, and I forget the name, so forgive me. I should have written it down. But it was essentially one streamer that picked it up and played it for 4 hours, and then it kind of boomed from there.
Mhm.
But what is really interesting about Among Us, and it was a theme along with Wandersong as well, is that it was performing in not a westernized real market, and that's what kept it alive. So what initially happened was that apparently it was doing really well in Korea. It actually got picked up by a Korean streamer, and it wasn't doing crazy numbers, but they had a big market in Korea, and that's why they put some more content into it for the Korean market, because people were interested, and that was kind of enough to keep it alive.
Hmm.
And then when it got picked up in the Western market and onto more onto Twitch, yeah, and people started playing it, and then it's boomed. And they kind of have really capitalized on what is happening in the world right now. When it first came out, because it's been out for 2 years. I think 2018 it came out, and if you look at the Steam playing charts, it was kind of like nothing, 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 and it's huge now. Um, when it first came out, it was kind of marketed as like a game you play with your friends, because it is, and it was kind of put like, oh, you're in the same room and you're playing together, and the game doesn't really suit itself to that. So people kind of very quickly, I guess, were like, oh, this doesn't, it doesn't suit itself to this. Whereas now, where we're all playing remotely and playing on Discord, it's like, oh, this is actually a really good remote game to play when you can mute your mics and you don't have people screaming when they get murdered in O2 by someone they thought was their friend, and it works a lot better there. And it's the kind of game where people have wanted to come together in the current climate and play together, and this game really is in the strength of that. It really suits the current environment, and they've been able to get on the back of that and really push that, and that's definitely helped. So that's another one of the examples where you can't rely on this as a business plan, because who saw this coming? But it's being aware of the factors around you that are happening in the real world and jumping on the back of it and kind of making the best of bad situations, or just making the best of the current situation and using it to your advantage to get your game out there.
Yeah, there's a concept, isn't there, called newsjacking, and this idea of like, I think someone calls it urgent genius. I feel like is the word I've seen used on LinkedIn, and I'm outing myself as a person who actually reads LinkedIn, which is very shameful. But yeah, this idea that you can leverage newsworthy incidents and events. I mean, 2020's got a whole lot of news. I don't know if you've noticed, but we tend to have enough news in a single 2020 day that would have filled a whole year of like 2005 news. So yeah, there's a lot going on, lots of things that you can latch onto, lots of cultural situations that are maybe a little bit unusual this year. I'm curious about what other games you've got that you've thought about though. So I know Among Us is a great example. What other games have you been looking into?
Yeah, so I referenced it right at the beginning to Wonder Song. It's not actually a game I'm familiar about. I just kind of stumbled across it through Simon Carless, and that's kind of what got me kind of reading into this a little bit more. So Wonder Song is a game that came out a couple of years ago again, and it's a puzzle game based around song. You're a bard, and you're going around collecting puzzle pieces to stop the world's demise, essentially. And again, they released and didn't get the reception that they wanted. It didn't really take off, and in the post-mortem that I was reading by the developer, it's kind of it's a real crushing feeling, and didn't really know why it wasn't working. But what's interesting in the post-mortem is that kind of as you go through it and read it, you can see him coming to like the realizations of like, oh, actually that had a factor. So one of the things he mentions about the reviews, so it got very good reviews off the bat, just not many. And then when it did start taking off again, like a lot of the reviews were, oh, this game isn't what I expected, but I love it. And it kind of really comes back down to, and it's similar to the Among Us, is kind of the positioning of a game. Like how you position your game has a big bearing on the uptake it will get. And clearly, like he realized, he positioned it in a way that wasn't maybe necessarily all that appealing to people, but then when people did pick it up, they loved it, and it kind of had a snowball effect. As when people, the more people that play it, the more people hear about it, and then the more people pick it up. And if it's one of those games which is a hidden gem, which it seems like this one is, it kind of needs that word of mouth to spread. It's quite a niche concept, so it didn't get the mainstream appeal and word out that some other games had. But yeah, once it picked up, it got going. And it's interesting you said about newsjacking. In this post-mortem, one of the things that he mentions is that a few months down the line, he noticed that on Steam he still had like the under review tag on his game, even though it was out and being sold. And he thought it was potentially because he'd had a lot of good reviews early doors, which a lot of games don't necessarily get. So he just jokingly on the game's Twitter account started joking about Steam thinking it was a bot and it wasn't real, but it is very much a real game. And it was around the time that Epic Game Store was just becoming a thing, and people were talking about like, oh, this is the next best thing. Steam doesn't treat indie developers right, and kind of it gave journalists a reason to talk about it off the back of what he was saying.
Mm-hmm.
And for disclosure, he wasn't bashing Steam; he was just making a light-hearted comment, and he did actually tweet and like, just to be clear, I'm not saying Steam is bad. I'm just making a joke. But that got it in the news, and it was in the news, so then more people played it, and then reviews spiked, and good reviews lead to more people seeing it and more people discovering it.
Yeah. So are there any games that you played before they were cool?
Any games that I played before they were cool?
I don't think you're a gaming hipster. I think you only play things long
I'm
after
not.
they're cool. I think you play things when they're like they've ceased to be cool.
Yeah, I don't set the trend. I'm still playing Nintendo 64 games, so I'm
They're eternally cool. There's
that is
something very
eternally
cool about Nintendo games.
So that's what I was playing before it was cool. I was playing Nintendo 64 before it was back. I guess it had been cool, then I was playing it, and now it's cool again. But I was all the way through.
What about something like Minecraft? When did you start playing? When did you first play Minecraft? Were you pre or post Notch?
I haven't played a lot of Minecraft, but that is a good example of a game that was a slow starter and took off, and a lot of things factored that. They put a lot of content into the game. There was the educational spin on it. There was the free-to-play version. Obviously, Mojang being bought out by Microsoft made a big impact, because then it got it on more platforms, which is a big thing, which helps getting games on more platforms. It's one of the things that the guy from WonderSong mentioned as well, like getting onto Xbox and being on Game Pass had a big bearing on it, and being in Humble Bundle again had, obviously that's not a platform, but that was a way of getting the game out to more people in a So in terms of having played Minecraft, that's not really something I've ever really done, but it is a very good example of a game that started off slow and is now huge. Another one which people might not necessarily consider is Fortnite, like one of the biggest games in the world right now. Like when that released in 2017, like that was quite slow off the mark, because people were like, oh, it's a PUBG rip-off, like it's just trying to be PUBG, and
early on,
then they added more content.
Yeah, early on they even pivoted, didn't they? Because early on, Battle Royale was just one small slice of what Fortnite was supposed to be, and it's interesting, fascinating, really, the way that they were able to divert resources, because they basically realised, okay, people playing Battle Royale, the graph is going like this, and people playing all our other modes, deathmatch, and all the standard ones we've put in, and the other stuff we've built, no one cares, so let's just go all in on the Battle Royale, and that's obviously paid off for them in a major way, and now they're kind of coming back around to like, what if we were more than a Battle Royale? But they really figured out how to, like you say, leverage that snowball effect, because once it started, it just kept growing, and who knows if it'll ever stop. One day it will. Either Apple will kill them, or another game will. One of those two things.
Yeah, one thing that I found really interesting through reading a bit more about this is, obviously everyone playing well, not everyone, but a lot of people are playing Among Us now, and it is the hottest thing, and it's kind of, people have branded it as an overnight success, which clearly it's not, because it came out 2 years ago. But what I didn't realize, and is maybe pertinent to it, is that it actually had like over 1 million downloads on mobile last year. Like over 1 million people last year had downloaded it on mobile, and I saw a really funny tweet around this, and someone basically said, no one cares about a game if it's got 1 million mobile downloads until people play it on Steam, which is essentially what has happened here with Among Us. It's got onto the Steam, it's taken off on the Steam platform, and all of a sudden that's made a huge difference. And there are things that you can do on Steam that can help you as well. So what Among Us did was they got on the daily deals. So I don't know whether that's, I think you're familiar with them, Adam. You probably are, because you're a gamer, so you'll have seen them. So Steam have these daily deals, and you can reach out to Steam and ask for them, or if Steam sees that you're doing quite well, they'll come to you and be like, do you want to be on the daily deal? And that's what happened to Among Us. They got asked if they wanted to go on a daily deal, And I think they went on at like 50% discount. So it wasn't the biggest discount they'd had. But what that does is obviously there is always some trepidation, I guess, from developers to put a discount on a game because obviously they've put a lot of effort into it. So they want to get the full value in that they think it's worth, and they don't want to maybe cheapen the game by discounting it. But what discounting can do is it can drive sales because people will pick it up because it's cheaper. But what it also does is it can drive wish lists, which was a huge thing for Among Us. They picked up a lot of wish lists from their daily deal. And then from more people playing it, from having picked it up, gained the traction, and then when they were more comfortable at dropping to an even lower price at one point, I think maybe in the summer sale, they dropped to 75%, and then all of a sudden all those wish lists come in. So again, it's not at the full price. But that's a lot of people getting the game in one go because they've been sat waiting from the initial discount. So discounting is definitely a mechanism that is useful to use. Obviously, the daily deal is a daily deal; it's on the day and it's gone. But if you are running a discount, then push that in your marketing. It doesn't necessarily have to convert to the sale right there and then. If it does, great, but you shouldn't underestimate the power that building your wish list has.
Yeah, people might add something, or people might be interested but not prepared to commit, and then it's the start of a journey which eventually leads them to commit.
Exactly.
I'm interested in your thoughts. I know we've got to wrap up soon, but I'm interested in your thoughts about Game Pass, because that kind of changes the paradigm for a lot of games, and we've seen some developers. I think Mike from No More Robots was out there talking about the numbers that Descenders did for them on Game Pass being incredibly healthy, like far beyond what they could have expected, because of the way that Game Pass works. And I guess that's, for some games, maybe that's an avenue. I know Game Pass isn't something you can't just stroll up to Microsoft HQ and chuck the game over the fence and put it on there. There's more of a gated community feel to it right now. You have to actually do a deal with someone at Microsoft, probably Phil Spencer in person, I imagine, with a big briefcase full of money. But getting on a service like that, or one of the competing services that are kind of rising to meet Game Pass, is maybe a good way to take a game that didn't perform as well. But the bar to entries was too high for most players. But when it's on Game Pass or a similar service, suddenly that bar is lowered massively, and that translates into success.
Yeah, I think you've absolutely hit the nail on the head there with the barrier to entry to play. I think that is the power of Game Pass. And I guess Game Pass can go two ways depending on the success of your game. If your game is really successful and Microsoft want it on Game Pass because it's going to be more alluring for people to sign up to Game Pass, they're going to come to you and they're going to have a good deal for you because it's in their interest to get you on there. If your game isn't performing quite as well, and your deal might not be as good, but it might secure more runway for you to be able to keep adding to the game or develop your next game, because obviously if you've done a deal with Microsoft, there's a deal in place. Obviously there'll be different ins and outs for every deal. I'm sure it's not necessarily a set contract. You're on Game Pass and everyone gets this amount of money. So but it's some kind of security, and for a game that isn't maybe performing as well as it would have liked. For example, WonderSong, Game Pass was one of the things that he said was a big help to them, is that it gets people to play the game. You've paid your whatever it costs a month on Game Pass. It seems like with all the different deals they have running, it changes. I'm not actually sure what the real number is, and maybe $10.99 at full price for Ultimate. So let's say you paid £11 a month to play. You've got all these games. You stumble across one that you would not have necessarily bought before, but it's there and you've already kind of paid for it and it feels free. You might give it a go, and that's how you find the hidden gems. So I think Game Pass is incredibly important in those instances, and it definitely shouldn't be seen as a negative. I think if it looks like it's going to work for you and you can get your game on Game Pass, then do it. Do it. So.
If Microsoft comes knocking, just say yes. Any final thoughts before we wrap up here? You can. I
don't think so. I think I've covered. I think I've covered everything that I wanted to cover.
Okay. You know what happens?
I'm sure I'll think of something immediately after we go off air. But
what I'm hoping for this video is this video has 0 views for about a year, and then in a year's time, it just shoots up, and we can't explain why.
Yep.
Well, that wraps us up then for this show today. Thanks for joining us. If you've been watching at home for the news, or for Halo, or for this, we're live every Thursday at 4 p.m. internet permitting. So make sure you subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, then make sure you subscribe there. Oh yeah, which way around is it? Twitch is follow, YouTube subscribe. There
That's
you go.
the one.
Someone's followed us right now. Thank you, Dr. Dre Damon. And we'll see you again next week. Thanks for tuning in. See ya!